that the West is liberal in that sense. So if you go out to Syncrude, there's Chrétien Point, and that it's called Chrétien Point because of the Prosperity Act that we passed, right? Now that said, if we had to message that, I don't think the best message is we love the oil sands as liberals. I don't. In this, it has to be more nuanced. There has to be a better approach. So what would be the message?
So I have to go, so I'm going to give you one. So for me, the biggest critical thing in that election was not being able to, for me, was not being able, having our leaders be able to effectively and economically communicate energy policy.
Yeah, energy policy, absolutely.
And communicate it to a point where every Canadian could take that message and say, when I'm attacked about oil sands, I can stand up and say, no, thank you very much. This is how it actually works.
Yeah. So energy policy.
So energy policy at a very grassroots and layperson level. And I wouldn't even say it's a clear message. It's a clear message on energy policy with economics attached to it.
That's what I was going to ask.
You got to show the money.
Yeah.
You got to show the money. You got to show exactly how it all flows through, and you've got to be able to speak it as though it's actually it's your own hand.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to ask the economic side because the energy policy just became an environmental policy.
It became carbon.
It has to be an economic policy because everybody here in the West depends on the oil, so it has to be sustainable economic policy.
Yeah. And in fact, it's even broader than the West because if you're in Ontario, carbon trading did nothing for us, right? It's not that we're going to abandon carbon trading; it's the messaging, right? And economic and environmental policies have to be integrated better. So, yeah, energy policy.
And I actually think that probably any of your policies have got to have a clear.
Oh, absolutely.
They didn't connect.
No, no.
It's not.
That's the biggest thing is economics.
It's our you know, and that's something we didn't talk about just as humans. We're starting to think in bytes.
Yeah.
I've got something.
So what's the model? Sustainable energy?
Yeah,
One
just
last thing before I go.
Heather's going to leave.
It is this is a country and not a collection of 13 provinces and territories. It is a country, and it's not just physical borders between them that tie them together. It is economics, it is social justice, it is actual people, and you need to actually, this is a country, and the policies should be not necessarily seamless, but they should tie effectively across. And if that means that you're working effectively with premiers and municipalities being a huge issue, we are no longer just rural. But it's again, it's not this, okay, well, Alberta this and Ontario that. This is a country called Canada.
So
and they need to, and it's the responsibility of a federal level of government to make sure that that's effective. So whether that's engaging municipalities appropriately or engaging provinces appropriately, the federal government is responsible for making sure that happens in the most effective manner.
a cohesive federal unit.
It's a cohesive country.
And in terms of messaging, that does distinguish us because we're not regionalist, right? We're not regionalizing or balkanizing the country. We are federating the country.
Yeah, and it's beyond job, like Bob Ray keeps talking about jobs, and it's beyond that. It's an overall economic prosperity.
Yeah, economic prosperity. Okay, but here's the question, right? In the last election, bye Heather. In the last election, we talked, one of our message points was economic prosperity. If you asked me, I was like, economic prosperity because that's how we use it. Nobody got it, right? Bob Ray stands up and says, jobs, jobs, jobs. He got quoted in every single, it was front page news. So here's the issue between what we know needs to happen and how do you message it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but I mean, jobs. Anyways, I'm gonna.
Yeah, no, it's good, but it's good.
Yeah. And in terms of messaging, I guess communication, that's not my that's the best definition yet.
But this is what the party's asking for. What are your communicative suggestions? Because it's tough. We all know what the good policies are, but how do you message
I never
it?
try to dumb it down, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem. You have to balance, I guess, dumbing it down versus.
Although, let's remember there is a difference between simple and simplistic.
Yeah.
Right? We're looking for simple messaging that gets our complex ideas, not simplistic ideas. So, sorry, I think Art and then Michelle.
It just, I've worked on CO2 and that $2 billion that the Alberta government is. I talked to 4 MLAs. David Swan is the only one that understood what I was talking about.
Right.
And he didn't oppose it. He agreed with it. And there's people in Edmonton that promoted that, and that's the reason the 2 billion got passed. And part of it was my numbers that I worked on a report. So I guess the thing I'm saying is you have to educate the people and they have to work together. And the oil sands, I remember exactly when that got approved. And I wasn't involved in it, but I was fairly close to it. The fellas got together and they couldn't make it work. So they got just a small group of them, both federal, provincial, and that, and said, okay, how do we make a company? How to make this work? So they said, okay, they wound up with a 1% royalty payout. And then I think it's 5% or it changes after that. And that meeting, all of a sudden, they were all approved. Both governments were there, both federal and provincial. And it took just a meeting of the top people. They did it not publicly, but they understood things.
And actually, Art, if I can add to that, because one of the suggestions I made 2 weeks ago when I was in Ottawa was to my own caucus, and now we're down to 35 MPs, most of whom are from the East, right? Except for Ralph Goodell and Kevin Lamoureux in Manitoba, they're all from the East. Most of our own Liberal MPs, if you had asked them 15 years ago, they understood energy development. Today they don't. And that's not because they don't understand, it's because they're scientists and they're experts in economics out in Ontario or out in the Maritimes. So my suggestion was that at the convention in January, if it's possible, or the one in 2013, that I and a series of experts on the oil sands would offer a historical account of the oil sands so that our own party could develop some more differentiated policies with regards to energy and departments. Because we ended up getting, from a very small cohort of people, carbon capture and trade. We didn't get anything that specifically understood the oil sands, right? So hopefully that will change, and the point is taken to heart, and the messaging will then hopefully come out of that. I don't know what the message is, but it has to start with our own MPs actually understanding what bitumen extraction is, as opposed to traditional conventional oil and gas, and how it funds Ontario's manufacturing sector. So it's totally understood.
Keystone Pipeline is an example of why people don't understand.
Yeah, and this was really well received. So.
I have some questions about the extraction of natural resources, because it seems like we're becoming too dependent in Canada to replace on natural resources to replace what people used to be have occupations and jobs for in the past to bring money to the country. We've changed our exports of manufacturing, and we're now exporting natural resources, right? And leaving people by the wayside.
I'm just going to go to Michelle because she was waiting for her introduction, and then we can come back to this point because the issue of diversification of the economy may be one of our messages. It's worked across the province provincially to talk about diversifying this economy. Would it work for the Liberal Party of Canada to talk about a knowledge-based economy? I don't know if it's the right message, but it's worked provincially to some extent, right? So Michelle, what's your introduction?
I just wanted to, we were talking about communicating to the public earlier, and simplistic versus simple messages just to convey our messages. And one of the things that we were talking about when Hedy Fry came to Calgary was the concept that, maybe we should just start being our own media. We can start videotaping, like the oil sands panel that you may have missed that you got the flyer for. It's on YouTube. And we can start presenting our policies and convey them, the more complex issue, in short little videos and throw it on the YouTube. That would help us be able to communicate to the public a little more, because everybody has their own interest. Some people are very interested, especially Albertans. What is the oil sands and the Liberals' point of view? What are the economists are very concerned, okay, what is that point of view? So at least people can go into their specialty areas and look at our policy based on that. Whether just in a way to convey our message better, because right now everybody was not 100% sure what our policies were in a lot of different areas.
There's actually a couple points on that just to reflect what was said during these big caucus meetings. So what you're suggesting, Michelle, is that it's the medium as well as the message, right? We've all been talking about what's the message, and you're saying, hey, let's look at the medium. And this is really an important point, because we're not the party in control anymore. When Bob Rae speaks, we don't get the front page. Right? We're not even the official opposition, and that's a reality that the Liberal Party has never faced before. We can have great policies now, and we won't be heard in conventional media because we don't have the position. So how do we actually render that media savvy attitude? How do we make a media savvy attitude? And if conventional media is not going to come along with us, What are the other methodologies we can use? So I think that's right, and the party's certainly looking for recommendations on how we go about doing that. And that at the riding level means we set up a YouTube channel on our website in Calgary East and maybe in Southeast. If you're running events, right? It comes down to that level.
Just so you know, what I've picked up, diversify the economy. I also talked about champion alternatives. Whether it's energy, health, or whatever, we're much more likely to look at those, it goes back to evidence-based. So you do look at everything.
Yeah, we're liberals because we're not afraid of options. Yeah, I think that's probably right. You two are quite new to the group, so what do you feel actually about this? Whether it's about the content of the message or the nature of the messaging? What would it take to get you out to vote liberal in 2015?
I've noticed it seems to reach people that are naturally attuned to the news, like my father, listens to a lot of political stuff, but most young people are stuck in their own little world and it's very hard to get to them. So I think, well, just in the mayoral election, I think that the reason our current mayor was so successful is he's tapped into things that young people use, the social media. He was the only person that had Facebook ads, for example. So if the Liberals somehow package their message in a way that can attract young people, because anyone that's over 18, they should have voters.
And actually, to put that in context, it's just not the case that youth have always been disengaged, right? There's a historical pattern here. If you look in the 1950s and 60s, it used to be the case that about 5 to 10% of Canadians had party memberships. And your dad and mom would go get a party membership, and you would do it too. Now it's less than 1%. And when you look at youth under a certain category, like 25 and under, a lot of the studies are showing that it's not that you're not politically active, it's that you're joining a lobby group or an animal rights group or an environmental group. You're joining a special interest group rather than joining a political party. And that's the reality that is liberals. We have to figure out how to address. How do we do that? Does it mean we go to your special interest group? Or does, if we have Facebook and YouTube, is that enough? I don't think it is. I think there has to be something more, but we add to
I
what
put
you're
it on there,
suggesting.
an alternative to membership needed. Because
Can I
it
ask,
is,
though, about
it's stated.
Sorry, Diane, about social media. A lot of youth say that they want social media to be used, and actually the Liberal Party does use it.
A lot.
But what is it about Facebook and Twitter and how social media is used exactly that attracts you as a youth? So I think that there's a bit of a disconnect. A lot of people think if I use Twitter or I use Facebook, that's it, will engage the youth or will engage the general populace. But there's something enigmatic there that we're not tapping into, that we're not understanding. So I'd like to know a little bit more from your perspective. What is it about Twitter or social media or whatever it is that...
How did Kucher get a million friends?
Oh, yeah.
Is it the messaging? Is it the marketing of it? Is it frequency? It's the fact that
You see, have a voice on those areas without having to focus change what's your opinion to people that are like it's all connected in the web basically. You're friends with people that have similar your ideas spread sort of. It's just to be able to have a voice because
Is it just ease of use then maybe? Because
that also.
if you look at, for example, letters to the editor have dropped off radically. And if you look at the age demographic of people who write letters to the editor, I mean, I'm quite young, I still do it. But most people who write letters to the editor are 45 plus. Whereas if you look online at the Globe and Mail or Calgary Health, the online commentary to stories, which is a letter to the editor, but it's submitted online, is massive. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of subscribers who are submitting letters to the editor, but they're just not submitting it to the editor, they're doing it online.
But I think that's of their own volition. So I think what I'm hearing is that you have a voice. And I think social media is being used to talk at youth, to send
with you.
instead of with them, and engage with them, but to send a message to them and just bombard them with information.
I think this is a little bit of a problem with expecting that you're going to go on Facebook, make a Facebook page, make a YouTube video, and that youth are going to automatically want to see it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have a couple social media sites, and when I go on them, I don't go on them to, sometimes I do look at your Facebook page, but
Thank you.
I don't feel the need to go. If Bob Ray had a blog, I probably wouldn't read it, as bad as, but I think that the problem with youth is not that we're not being accessible enough to them, because you search someone's name on Google and you can come up with every different medium for contacting them, but it's actually having them acknowledge off the computer that you're there and that you're not just someone on the internet, because anyone can say what they want on the internet. I've written letters to the editor, but that doesn't mean that I stood up in front of a crowd of people and actually defended Steve Randall, right? Like, no one knows that that was me. So why would people, they read it for 2 seconds?
I would assume they wouldn't get feedback.
What do you mean?
You know, I mean, you're putting your views out there and your opinions out there.
Like you guys are not getting feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the youth probably, I mean, they're sitting there consulting, but do they get the feedback?
Yeah, the response.
But I don't know, I don't even know if logistically you can do it, so.
And actually, it's one thing I learned during the campaign is Twitter doesn't work unless I respond directly
Yeah.
to people, and then your Twitter following, increases. But that takes a lot of manual labor. And what Anna was suggesting, I think it's right, is that when political parties adopted social media a few years ago, we adopted it as a means of doing exactly what we did through traditional medias, just advertising a press release. But now we're doing it through Twitter and Facebook too. And if the medium is different, then we can't be using it to do the same things. So
You know what's come up too is expectations then.
Sure. Yeah.
And Josipa touched on it because I know, even as a council member, the number of people that contacted me in the office, you know, I actually told administration that they were failing because the questions that I got should have been handled by administration, and their response was they wanted the people to phone me directly because they knew that I needed the vote, the sign location. And so anytime there's that personal interaction, the bottom line is if you're doing that on a daily basis, and Twittering is no different, you have no time to lead.
It's a fine balance.
Because leading requires envisioning. Leading is hard work, but people assume you're a lead. You're not. They don't even think of leadership. They think of management.
So I guess that's an issue for the party is how we manage.
That's an issue, how you manage it.
So there are a few hands up, and actually I think Frank, you had your
should write that down, actually.
yeah, management of our social media. And it's true, I mean, what, we would spend, I could easily spend 4 hours on Facebook responding to people, but actually I have a career and other things too, so how do you manage that, right? So I think there were a few hands up here, maybe should I just start here and go around?
Can you turn on that light switch by the door?
A few years ago, I put out church flyers, but I'd always put a joke or something interesting. So people would think, oh, this is, you know, they'd read it. And today I got an email today, it says, why women in exercise class won't treat milk up. What's the picture? Look down the picture. They're all sitting on these big balloons, all these women. And I looked and I said, yeah, this is good. You know, they're all, a dozen women sitting on balloons and they don't choose bubble gum. All right. Did you get it?
But a bunch.
Yeah, so we have a twist why people want to read something.
Can we go? We should maybe go on because I.
Yeah, I think because we're going to finish up.
Now we're pretty adaptable. We don't have to do the whole agenda.
Should we just get people's comments quickly and then we'll move to the next?
I got one word.
Yeah.
Relevance.
Relevant.
Are we relevant to you?
Make us important, more important than your message.
I'm turning this off.
Are we relevant to youth? But, and if I cannot be, then what is the youth? I mean, you know, it's like talking about seniors. Who are
I'm
these
not
youth
even talking
anyhow?
about youth, I'm talking about relevant to people.
Yeah.
People,
People
yeah,
are
that's actually-
specifically geared to what, whether it's the environment. Most of the people I talk to in my writing, and let's face it, I live in, and one of the richest writings in the country. I got taxes, taxes, taxes. This is why I'm voting conservative. They're saying they're on my side in taxes, and I go, well, they're really not. But to convince them of that is completely different. The relevance of who we're talking to, what do they want? And this is part of what we're doing here is, what do you want? Tell us.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm getting a message, it's 8:30, right?
It's 7:30.
Oh, it's 7:30. What did we say? Yeah, okay, everyone finish on time. So maybe we will move through, but Natalia, did you have any information to say? So Frank, we were gonna, this is just an interjection. For those of you who are gonna come along with us on this process, and I hope you do come back and we're looking to expand each one. If you have detailed ideas about things, right? And Frank has some very detailed ideas, Brian has some detailed ideas, I do. You can put them together in the format of a document, however you wish. And Frank's done this, which he calls blue-gray. And it's quite a lengthy document. So if you'd like to read through Frank's ideas on this, you can let me know and I'll email you. In fact, we'll get all your contact information. And you can read through this, and a lot of Liberals and non-Liberals are engaged right now in writing, their ideas out about how we need to move forward, both on policy and on structure. So the idea is that at each of these meetings, we give over, if you've taken the time to do something like this, if you want to take 4 or 5 minutes, Frank, to actually just to summarize for us, what is your notion of blue grit, and why do you think this is what we need to revivify the party on? And it falls within values and ideas because it's about policy and policy ideas. We may not all agree, we may agree, but at least Frank gets a chance to sort of talk about this, and I can send this out to you if you want to read it.
Oh, this is Treasurer Brief here. I wasn't expecting to be talking at all here tonight, but so
Put you on the spot.
I have to wing it here a little bit. I'll just give a brief background about myself. I'm a lifelong Albertan. And I took out my first Liberal membership when I was 19 years old. And I actually was the secretary at Calgary East for a while. But over the years, I've kind of bounced between the Liberals, and for a while I was at Social Credit, and then back to the Liberals, and back and forth. And my focus is on the provincial politics, so I don't want to take too much time here to talk about that. But I'm of the opinion that the Liberal Party in Alberta is missing an opportunity to take advantage of a gap which I believe exists between where the Liberals currently stand and where the Conservatives stand. And so I developed this paper here called Blue Grit that advocates kind of a shift a bit more to the right, so that you're trying to draw some of the support from the what a lot of people term the red Tories. And I think there are a lot of people in the Conservative Party who are looking around anyway, and they're rejecting wild rose. They don't really want to go wild rose, but they don't want to go liberal because they perceive the party to be a little bit on more center left almost, because we've seen efforts by David Swan he did approach for a while the NDP, the Greens, the Alberta Party, and they rejected that. But I believe that there's that little window of opportunity between where the Liberals currently are and where the Conservatives have been. And anyway, I believe that that document addresses a lot of those kinds of concerns and suggests some ideas and some aims and objectives. And it comes in 2 parts. There's the main body of the paper, which is more of a vision document, if you want to call it that. It kind of lays out a plan that you may not necessarily agree with, but at least it would show that the Liberals are focused and have some plans of what they would like to accomplish. And then I have an appendix at the end there, which is a bit more animated and a bit more throws out a few more ideas, and I think they're fairly innovative ideas, and I certainly want to encourage all of you to take a look at it. It's an abridged version of it is currently posted on the Alberta Liberal Party blog. But I have an address on there, an email address, and I can send anybody who wants it a copy of the document. And I encourage you to take a look at it. And if you have some comments to make on it, by all means do it, because it's not getting very much of a read because it is fairly long. And but the idea is to get some discussion out, and it lays out some aims and objectives for the party, and I think it makes for a good discussion paper. And I have an email. Maybe I just quickly give it to everybody here.
We can actually even do better because we're going to collect everybody's email up, and we're going to add a section on our website that is for documents submitted by people in Calgary East or who are interested in these policy tables. So I'm going to upload your document to the website, and people can download it from the website, which should make it a lot easier for people to access it. And the thing is, a lot of people have submitted some documents. Frank's done a really thorough job of identifying and I think representing the view of a lot of people who feel that we have shifted too far left. If you believe in a left-right spectrum, which I don't, but if you do, you feel that we've shifted too far left, so let's retake that right. There are other people, for example yourself, who feel that we've shifted too far right. And this is a live debate, I mean, not just in caucus and Senate, but among the membership as to what our identity is, because for the last 25 years we've held on to that center, and in that center we've held on to the left and the right, because we were winning, right? And now we're not winning, so do we shift right, do we shift left, and what the hell does it mean to be at the center if we stay where we are? So this document, right, I'm going to upload to our website, and there'll be a space there for people to comment, and you'll be able to access those comments. And I'm going to encourage people to take a look at this before our next one, and find out whether in fact you agree with that group of people in the party who feel that we've gone too left, if that's in fact what you feel. And if you don't, let us know why, because at the next meeting we'll have a presenter who feels that we've gone too far right.
And Josipa, we did put in there, because one of the things is valuing perspectives.
Yeah.
You come up with a lot better solution when you actually bring all the perspectives to the table.
Yeah, that's right. And I think also, Frank, your point about this not having any effect provincially or federally, it really does, because in Alberta, provincially speaking, there's this old adage that the reason the Tories win is because Liberals vote for them. And the idea is that provincially we're much more right-wing than we are federally as a Liberal Party. I don't think that actually maps onto reality, but that is the perception very often when you talk to people working within the party. And so we will be talking in the next policy roundtables about cross-jurisdictional liberalism and whether that means we can actually unify provincial and federal stances. So we will upload this, Frank. There's some ideas here about healthcare, there's some ideas about taxation, there's some ideas about public education, and the degree to which we have to accept potentially privatized options. Right, so, right. Thank you very much, Frank.
Yeah, I just want to say in closing that it also addresses small business, people who think more of a small business is small government, small person, and it takes a very advocates a kind of a go slow approach to economic development in this province. I think what we saw in the last decade with the boom and that almost causes many problems as it's solved, and a lot of the people who were at the lower end of the spectrum were the ones we all only heard about the ones who benefited. We didn't hear so much about the people who had a tough go of it. The prices were high and the revenues were coming in.
And I think at the next policy roundtable, where we focus specifically on policy, this issue will be raised as well. It's because if you look at the last 25 years as a party, especially when we had Paul Martin as finance minister, the Liberals were seen in terms of political perception as the party that understood small business, mid-sized business, and large corporations. We've lost that. For whatever reason, people don't feel that we understand small business, large business, or mid-sized business anymore, but that used to be our ground. So we'll be looking at it in more detail the next one when we get to raise some of these issues about what is our business stance.
Thank you for that.
Well, and thank you,
Thank
Frank.
you,
I really
Frank.
appreciate it. And we'll post that.
We're going to go on to the second one.
Giancarlo,
Yes.
thank you for joining us, Giancarlo.
I can't stay long, I'm afraid, but I just wanted to just
For those of you who don't know, he's the local city councilor here in this area.
I'm a
You
big
can
fan of
ambush him if you have
Josipa's.
any issues.
Wow. And a big fan of your sequence.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So what we're going to do in the last few minutes is
I'm
just...
the facilitator.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I have a way of taking over, so I have to sit down now.
It's called leadership.
I know the feeling. More leaders are apparently ones who interrupt.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
We're going to go on to kind of the next section, which is a little more gritty. It's a little more not loosey-goosey. And Josipa's going to be on right away anyways, because we're going to talk about what is the present structure. Now this is interesting because I thought I'd bring this along. Though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from new or now and make a brand new ending. And I think that's what we're looking at, is making a brand new ending. So how do we get there? And because we're evidence-based, we need to know a little bit more. So we're talking about what is the present structure now. Great. So Josipa is on again.
Ta-da!
No, I just had to introduce her.
This is what I thought was one of the things I truly, truly believe is that most people who are in the party or who want to become part of the party don't actually know how the party functions. right? If you said to people, what is the Liberal Party? You don't actually know. Is there a president? Is there executive? What are these groups? What are these organizations? What do they do? When we talk about elitism, who's being an elite? So what I thought today was I could present a basic structure of the party, explain to you what areas are up for negotiation, because there's a convention in January, we're going to be voting, you're going to be asked to vote on whether certain parts of this party should continue to exist. How can you vote if you don't even know what they are? So who here feels they could explain the structure of the Liberal Party? Anna, well done. Okay, Brian, that's good. Okay, 2 in a room.
I was going to ask, is there a basic structure?
There is a basic structure to the party.
Do you want to write it on as you're talking?
Yeah, actually what I'll do is I'll write it on as I'm talking. So this, what I'm hoping is, and we'll put this up and email it out to you, but you can walk away with this and come back to the next meeting at least understanding the structure, so when we talk about reforming it, you have an opinion, right? So there's 3 parts if we want to talk in terms of hierarchy. The Liberal Party is quite unique. It's the only one to have a number of certain structural aspects embedded within it. So first of all, like all parties, we have, well, not all parties, but we have the caucus, right? Which is currently our 35 MPs, very small caucus. We have the Senate. And in fact, I can't tell you how many senators we have, probably somewhere around 40, something like that right now. And then we have the executive. And this is the big problem, the executive. The executive, technically, of the LPC, we'll call this the party executive, includes us. Although we're, in this sense, we're quite low down on this level. So nobody's really talking about reforming the caucus because, hey, if you're an elected MP, you're an elected MP. What do elected Liberal MPs do? Well, they come up with policy ideas and so forth. In theory, the Liberal Party functions in such a manner that this part is the most important part. We're the only party to really privilege this part. Under this part, and I'll explain why that is in a second, in theory, anybody in this part who comes up with an idea and passes it at a convention with the support of the membership should actually control what these 2 parts say. In practice, that hasn't happened, and this is one of the big issues, is that the party gets together, we do things like this, we have conventions, we have ideas, we come up with notions, and then these people who get elected and these people who get appointed don't follow through on what we said they should follow through on. So that's one of the big issues. Should we pass a resolution in the future whereby the people on this side, which includes us, really can control what the people here end up saying in the format of this policy book in 2015? So that's one of the things that's up for grabs. But what you need to know is, what does this actually include? So if we talk about the LPC party, and here I'm just talking about this section here. The LPC party is divided as follows. It has a national executive. Okay, so a national executive, which is basically a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and then a council of presidents, which includes all of the presidents from riding associations. And that includes Anna, for example, who is the president of Calgary East Riding Association. So there are 308 riding associations. Technically, there are 308 presidents that are represented at this level. So when there's an issue of some sort, and you have a national executive call, Anna and all 307 other presidents are called to that call. In theory, Anna, when she's on that call, is representing us here. In reality, we only actually have, I think the number is 160 or 120 ridings that function. So,
I think it's a little bit higher. I think isn't it 182?
Oh, maybe it's 182. I can't remember. It's definitely under 200. It's about 2/3, right? Yeah, it's about 2/3. So we have about 100 and some ridings that have no presidents, no members, no membership lists, nothing's happening in those areas insofar as liberalism is concerned. So the actual executive is composed of about 100 some. One of the issues that's coming up is, how do we make it 308? And when Michael Ignatieff was first elected as leader in 2000, whatever it was, 7, I can't even remember now, was it 2007, 2008? Yeah, they came, 2009, yeah, they came out after Diane, sorry. They came out with a 308 strategy, and the idea was you run in all 308 ridings. You can only do that if you actually have riding associations existing in all 308 ridings. That's based off the Obama idea of running in every constituency. So one issue is, how do we make our national executive actually represent the whole country? Because right now, our national executive is heavily biased towards cities, where we have a lot of ridings. Okay? Within that national executive, then, you go down and you have something called PTAs. We are the only federal party to have PTAs. PTAs are provincial territorial associations. territorial associations. So there is technically a PTA for every province and territory. Each PTA is kind of a mini version of the national executive. There's a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and then various chairs, like a cultural chair, a communications chair. One of the problems that the party has right now is, what is the role of the PTA? Are they effective? In theory, when the party approved PTAs, the idea was that we'd have regional representation. So liberals in Alberta might have a different way of doing things from liberals in the Maritimes. And that was the role of the PTA. One of the problems is they eat up money. So if I donate money to this riding, a portion of that money in theory goes to the PTA. Am I getting value for my money from that PTA? And we know there are better PTAs and worse PTAs. So some PTAs that really function and build up their ridings in the province, and others that are completely defunct and do nothing but take away money from either the executive or the lower level ridings. So big debate in January will be, do we get rid of the PTAs? And if you ask people in Alberta, there are extreme opinions on this, extreme opinions. Because some people's positions, titles, individual identity are tied up with this PTA level. If you ask me, as a candidate or as a riding association member, I would say the PTAs, I'm neither for them nor against them, but I have to see some value in them. If I don't see value for them, I'm going to vote that they be disbanded. That's where I stand in January, but each of you will be asked as members of the party, if you are, to vote on this matter. So you'll have to develop an opinion on whether the PTA is value oriented. Below the PTA, in theory, is the riding association, which is what we are, with its membership. The Liberal Party of Canada, like I said, is the only one with PTAs, so the NDP don't have it. The Tories got rid of them long, long, long ago. There's a huge portion of the Liberal Party executive that wants to get rid of PTAs, a huge portion of riding associations that want to keep PTAs. And they want to keep PTAs because of these 180 riding associations that exist, not all of them exist to the same level. So if you look at Calgary East, we have a functioning board, we do events, we run our own things, we set our own agenda, we raise our own money, we rule, right? If you look at some of the other ridings, basically all that exists is a president and maybe a vice president or a treasurer. Nothing else exists. So there's a person with a position, but they're not actively trying to bring members on board, they're not actively running events, they're not setting the agenda. So for those particular people and those ridings, the PTA is an easy way to say, we don't have to do any work. The PTA is doing it for us. They're going to run a regional event, we're going to partake in that regional event, and it looks like we've done 3 things a year. Whereas in fact, nothing's been done on the ground. And if we're talking about revivifying the party and winning, especially winning in Alberta, you need functioning riding associations with memberships over the course of 4 years, running events, setting the agenda, finding candidates, the whole bit. So this is how the party is structured. It doesn't look very clear, so I'm not very good at drawing these things, but that's how the party is structured in theory. The Liberal Party of Canada, despite having PTAs, insists that the key organization is the riding association. We are the only party to put so much emphasis on the riding association. If you look at the Constitution of the Conservative Party of Canada, the national executive rules. Okay, so, and if you look at elections, that makes a difference. It means that if you are a good conservative and you're out in Rob Anders riding out in the Northwest and you can't stab Rob Anders and you want to get rid of Rob Anders, you have no voice because these are appointments from above. That's how the Conservative Party functions. Also, if you look at the last election, when I go to run a campaign, I have to find my campaign manager, I have to find my campaign helpers. The Conservative Party has the national executive do that for all of its ridings. So if I am, pick a conservative in town, Deepak O'Brien, okay? If I'm Deepak O'Brien, I don't actually have to go and do any of that. The national executive will give it to me. There are some liberals who think we should adopt this model, okay? And there's other liberals who think we should stick with the grassroots, organize your own affairs, get it going kind of attitude. I'm clearly in the grassroots camp because I think that's robust, healthy democracy. And even though the top-down model may achieve electoral wins, it's not the kind of win I want. That's where I am, but each of you has the right to your own opinion. So that is how the party's structured. Now, in addition to that, there are commissions. There's 4 of them. We're the only party to have special commissions. The first one is, well, I'll start with the youth. There's the Youth Commission, there's the Women's Commission, there's the Aboriginal Commission, and there's the Seniors. We're the only federal party to have specialized commissions. The idea of the commissions, you can imagine what it was. They weren't all set up at the same time. They were set up at different points in history to actively encourage the participation of these groups. So the Women's Commission was established to get more women into the political party, to get more women elected. The youth one was established to get more youth in the party. The Aboriginal one to get more Aboriginals, and the seniors to represent seniors' views, in particular where they're vulnerable seniors. Big issue in January is, do we get rid of these commissions? This is the reaction of a lot of people. Don't we want special interest bodies representing special interest groups? My natural inclination is to say yes, unless they're not working and they don't all function very well. And that's what we have to look to as a party. My natural inclination is to say, oh yeah, you better keep that Women's Commission. But I also know the problems I face in getting the Women's Commission to do anything. Okay? The Women's Commission is quite effective in certain areas of this country. It's not effective in other areas of the country. Aboriginal Commission, same thing. Youth Commission, you fall into the same trap with any of these organizations where, like any political party, if you get a few group of people controlling the means of power, then this can be rendered defunct. But if you get some good people from a grassroots perspective infiltrating these groups, then these organizations can do a lot of targeted, healthy, democratic work. So the issue for us is, do we want them to exist? In what fashion do we want them to exist? And how much money do they get?
Reform.
What's that? Reform. So the idea is, if we're going to reform them to make them more effective, what we need to identify is, well, what's wrong with them?
Yes.
And one of the things I would argue start off that's wrong with them is that most of you don't even know what these exist or what they do. That's a problem. If these exist and they do something, every Liberal should know about it and every Canadian should know about it. If they don't know that they exist, then are they functioning? This is something we'll have to discuss.
I just want to say to that with the executive, unless it's a higher position, everybody that fills these roles is volunteers.
Oh yeah, good point.
Okay, there's Carol Hokel, I'm sure if you've got a Liberal membership, you've gotten an email from her. She's the executive director. She's the hired person, and this is her job, is to forward all the information and things like that. Everybody else is a volunteer. Same with commissions, executive presidents,
the whole
and everything. And that's one of the key differences from what the Conservatives do. When everything comes from above, they have paid people to do the job. Okay? And there's consequences if they don't do the job. Whereas in our system, and this is the key thing which Josipa was saying is, and we had this discussion with over Chinese, you can fire volunteers. And that's one thing the Liberal Party doesn't do. If you got a volunteer, can you use them? If a volunteer isn't useful,
I fired them.
Or creates obstacles.
exactly. You know, and this is the key when it comes to all these commissions and things like this, is useful people in the positions. You know, whether people want the job for the sake of the title, are they going to be effective? And there's just not enough people, especially in Alberta, who can spend the time taking on these positions. So does it make our PTA in Alberta effective or not effective? And there's two sides to the coin. It depends who you're talking
Probably
about.
more than two sides.
Well,
and I
yeah,
think
exactly.
that's one of the things we're going to want to hash out. We won't hash it out today. It was just presenting the structure to you, but we're going to have to hash these out in detail over the course of the next couple months and the next year. It's not just about, are these all volunteers, because they are. There's a suggestion that we do hire our president. We've never done that before, but do we take $80,000 and say, this is a yearly salary to somebody to do the presidential job full time? Is that what we need to revivify? And that's something that we all have to make a decision on at that convention in January, or by de facto vote as a member through your riding association. So important issues are up at stake, because if this structure isn't functioning and part of it's not functioning, we really struggle come campaign time to actually win campaigns. Because come campaign time, you don't have a lot of time to get volunteers together, to get a structure together. That structure has to be there already. And in Alberta, there's chunks of that structure that just aren't working. So we're gonna flesh that out, I think, more as we go along, but my hope was to offer you that outline.
Yeah, and we really can't go, and we don't expect people to all of a sudden say, oh, this is the structure and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we can talk, because I've heard some of the things being touched on already, well, the criteria that they have to look at. So it's gotta be democratic. So right away, probably the simpler the better. So, because you have to understand it. It's either that or they do a good job of selling it. I'm educated.
I'd like to add metrics, measurable. This is one thing Brian and I have talked about. It came up in Ottawa. A lot of us have talked about it writing levels. You know, you need some measurables. Nobody likes to say you can measure a volunteer, but you need some measurables. If that president of the association has not had a meeting in 12 months, that person is no longer president of the association. So those kinds of metrics, whereby which you effectively, by your volunteers who are creating obstacles to pretty good.
And you just find wait, hopefully you don't go far.
Hopefully you don't. Hopefully people just improve. Hopefully they just improve.
Just quickly, I just want to follow up to what, is it Dawn?
Which one? Barry?
Your husband?
Oh, Art.
How are you? In terms of the candidates and such, I believe that there's a need to, do some active recruiting of people who have some name value, and they may not come to the Liberals. It may be a case of the Liberals having to go to them, asking them to come to a meeting like this and speaking, giving them the floor, and showing them, that you respect their opinions and their position in the community, and
So candidate recruitment.
yeah, and they have to kind of very high visible individuals because an ordinary individual who wants to run, he has to have a little bit of stuff. He has to have the organization. He has to have
What's that?
well, a lot of these people do. And it's important that you see if you can find some kind of middle ground to try to attract them.
Can I just do two things? Because this issue has risen before. There's two things on it. One is that you have to have a riding association existing in order to engage in candidate recruitment. Right? So where there's no riding association existing, it's very difficult to locally recruit local known individuals.
We don't
right?
have to hire one in this area.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. But the second thing is, so, the riding exists to recruit good candidates, to foster good candidates, and to win campaigns. If it's not doing that, then it's not functioning by our definition, right? But the second thing is, just to temper that, we also have to recognize people very often say we need to recruit great celebrity candidates. I would disagree with that. We have to make great candidates. And sometimes candidates are made, right? I don't have names, I don't have clout, but I'm a goddamn good candidate. And so I think if we take a look at different areas, you have to have functioning ridings to locate good talent that can be made into a great candidate. So I'd like to offer that differentiation. That's something we can debate about, but the fundamental point is the riding has to exist for us to candidate recruit. And that's the big problem we're facing. We have 100 ridings where we don't recruit candidates because we have nothing. Oh, yeah, sorry, I think, oh, yeah, Natalia?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, I'll give it up to the leader. Sorry, Dad.
Oh, no, I'm making notes.
So I have a question because I'm brand new to the Liberal Party. This was the first time I ever considered voting Liberal. I volunteered, so I don't really understand a lot of the nuances of the Liberal Party. So I was curious: is there actually no guidelines set out saying, okay, if you're a secretary, this is what is expected of you. If you're a president, this is what is expected of you. There's no actual structure in that term.
There are job mandates, is what you're asking for.
Yep.
There are, but they're not clearly defined enough, which is maybe another thing we can add.
Maybe just as an idea of reform.
They're very vague.
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe
very
they
vague.
should be more
So clear terms of
specific.
reference is what I was going to say as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the Constitution, and then the federal party, and then there's the Constitution of the provincial party, and then there's usually terms of reference for each DDA, we have a piece of what the mandates are. But again, Josipa was saying, when you only got 3 people interested in doing the job, who's going to force them to do the job?
Well, and the reason why I asked was because usually there's some kind of accountability. So, like if I was to have a job in the regular world where I got paid for it, if I don't meet my criteria, there are consequences. And then, of course, it doesn't sound like we have that, so maybe we just need to add to that.
That's right. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Thank you, sweetheart.
There are, but you need membership to enforce the no or to Before I joined, I was the 22nd member.
Healthy riding is about 200 members, just to give you a comparison.
So hard to know.
like companies. It's not the structure and the organization.